Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lugo's Journey podcast. Today, I have on an incredible guest with me. She is the author of Winning the Game of Work, a book that I found fantastic. Terry McDougall, I want you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here, Nick. I really appreciate you having me. I'm an executive and career coach, and I work with people who are successful but not satisfied to help them be more effective in their jobs, to find authentic pathways to where they would like to be in their careers, and to help people find jobs.
Yeah, I read your book. I thought it was fantastic. And most of it is just like absolutely incredible practical advice for people. And the biggest overarching theme of it is winning the game of work, right? So essentially work isn't really a it's not sort of like a traditional structural process. It's really a game, and you got to learn the rules of the game to play the game. So can you
Yeah.
really explain how is it a game and what are the rules of the game?
Yeah. I was really a really good student and overachiever in school. And I thought that if I knew how to be successful at school, that would naturally transition to being successful in the workplace. And to a certain extent, it does. I mean, I always was focused on what was expected of me. I always tried to put my head down, get the work done. And I just figured that just like in school, that if you performed well, it would be noticed and you'd be rewarded for that. But what I found was as time went on, that I saw people getting promoted ahead of me who didn't necessarily seem to be putting in as many hours as I did or working as hard. And I was always kind of curious and a little envious of how they were advancing when I felt like I was working very hard and not advancing as quickly. And so that just kind of led me on a very long journey that was driven by curiosity, which is pretty much how I've lived my whole life, to study leadership, to really study what it takes to get ahead. At one point, I actually a couple times I've hired coaches, but I feel like I learned a lot of lessons along the way about what actually worked and what I thought was going to work. And that just led me to start thinking about work as a game that nobody ever teaches us the rules.
Yeah.
Some people are lucky to maybe have mentors that teach them, but a lot of people aren't. And one of the things I found, not only in my own career, but in with a lot of people that I work with, is that they feel like they're working way too hard and not getting the success that they would like to get, and they don't know why.
Yeah, there was one. So there are two rules particularly really stood out, and one of them was one of the ones that you really just touched on right there. It was like, you know what, you could put your head down and you could work as hard as you can, but you got to be the person that gets noticed, right? Like it's not something where you just put your head down and you magically get all the work. It's like you need to communicate, you need to show people that you're actually doing your job. I found that to be incredibly fascinating. And
Yeah.
the other one that I thought that really stood out to me, because in my personal life, like this is what I struggle with. It was on page 51. It says people get so caught up with their goals that they never just take a step back and realize what it's all for, right? Like they never really look at their goals and
Yes.
figure out what they're supposed to do. So can you like elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So actually, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. I used to be, one of the jobs I had was heading event marketing at a big bank that I worked for. And we did hundreds of events a year, sometimes from like small executive dinners all the way up to, several hundred people conferences. And we spent millions of dollars a year on events. And when I first took over that role, if I had talked to many of the executives in the organization, they would have said, if the event happened, that was a success. And I have an MBA and, I'm a business person and a marketer. And I always was looking at like, what really was our objective here? That's how you really measure success. Sometimes people will come into work and they'll say, well, I filled out the spreadsheet like you told me to, but if that spreadsheet isn't helping to support the objectives of the business, it's useless. And so it's really important to always be focused on what is the highest value work that you can be performing, and not just do the things that you enjoy doing or do the things that have always been done the same way in the past, because a lot of times things are changing. We have to constantly be looking at, you know, what is needed in this moment to help us move towards the objective of the business. And
Yeah.
and frankly, when people do that, these are the people that get promoted. These are the people that are like, oh, they understand why we're here, and they're performing to help move the business forward.
So what do you find is the best way to sort of help somebody change that mindset, or any exercise or any sort of technique that sort of allows for people to be like, you know what? I wasn't focused on the things that I'm supposed to focus on. I usually put my head down, but now I'm going to focus on the things that are more important.
Well, I'd say the first thing is to get really clear on what the expectations are for your role, and not just the tactics, but why is your role needed within the organization? You know, like, what is the value that your role provides for the organization, and how does that ladder up to what the objectives are? So one of the things that I say to my clients, that especially people that I'm working with in job search, is that there's really only three ways to add value within an organization. You're either helping the company make money, save money, or reduce risk. Now, for some roles, it might be difficult to say, well, like, I'm a, you know, payroll clerk. How am I helping, you know, to save or make money or reduce risk? Well, I can't tell you that exactly, but you can say, well, okay, well, if I'm helping pay the people that bring the money in, and then I'm helping make money, or if I am finding, you know, a payroll outsourcing company that helps us reduce the amount of money it costs um, to do the paychecks, and then I'm helping to save money. But people always need to be looking at, how am I adding value in one of these three ways? And it requires stepping back and thinking bigger about what you do, and also probably understanding why your business, the business or organization that you work for, exists, and always be thinking, how am I supporting that overall mission of the organization?
That's awesome. Do you think it's really a struggle? I think one of the hardest struggles that people have in their own personal lives is, not only do they want to win the game of work, but they also want to win their own game, right? Their game of life, and they want to make sure they could balance that
Mm-hmm.
within their life. So do
Sure.
you find that it's so one of the things that you actually put in your book was, you said that there's a lot of focus sometimes on the external rewards, which is like getting status, getting a
Mm-hmm.
promotion, getting more money, and things like that. But do
Mm-hmm.
you find that there are ways for people to sort of, you know, shift their transition to the external, from the external factors to the internal factors of living a great life, being happy, and focusing on the more important things?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think that what's really important is to understand what you want to get out of your career. And very often when people start their careers, they're really focused on, oh, I just want a job. And a lot of times people will not stop and ask themselves, like, what skills do I want to use? What am I good at? What do I like to do? Because they're maybe coming at it from like a place of fear, that like, oh, I need to get a job. I just want to get any job. And the problem with that is that once you get on a path and you start getting experience, it's hard to step onto another path if you get too far down it. And so I think it makes sense in the beginning of your career to stop and see, what is it that I really want to do? Because if you're going to invest time and energy into something, it may as well be on a path that you're excited about. Now, that is not to say that if you have gotten on a path that you're not in love with anymore, that you can't pivot. I mean, that's a lot of the people that I end up working with, you know, that they're like, you know, 40 years old, and they're like, I got 3 kids, and, you know, I make too much money to go and do the thing I really want to do. I mean, there are ways to do that. But I guess going back to your question about how do you balance these two things, your internal validation for what you're doing in your life is where you will find happiness.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the reason why a lot of people are unhappy is that they're looking for happiness outside of themselves. And you're not going to find that. because I mean, believe me, I will tell you, I've seen plenty of people that are making, multiple six figures, maybe even approaching seven figures, who are not happy. They're like successful in so many of the ways that we think that's the definition of success. But they're not happy with the thing that they're doing because they haven't really checked in with like, what is it that drives me personally? So I think that you have to start there. And then when I talk about, winning the game of work, it's really starting with what are your own values and what are the skills that you want to use. But then from a kind of a really more of a tactical or strategy standpoint, what are the things that you need to do to bring your best to the organization so that it's recognized, and it's not, a lot of times, and I write about this in the book too, that there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm not going to socialize with people at work. I'm just going to, keep my nose to the grindstone and this will be noticed and I'll be successful. That's a really bad formula for success, because if you want to advance, you have to have people that are willing to advocate for you, and you've got to advocate for yourself, and you have to understand what matters to them. And on top of that, if there's going to be promotion within organizations, especially larger organizations, it's usually not one person. It's not just your boss making that decision.
Yeah.
They have to make that case to usually a larger committee, or at least to their boss, that this person is ready for promotion. And so that means that they've got to have a case. They can't just say, oh, I kind of like this person. They have to be able to say, like, this person went above and beyond, these were their expectations and they overperformed in this way. So anyway.
So how do you kind of draw that line? It's kind of difficult because a lot of people are scared to really come out, and they want to show off the fact that like they're humble and they put their nose to the grind and things like that. But at the same time, they really are worried about coming off as too cocky, right? Like the opposite of humbleness is cockiness.
Mm-hmm.
And you really don't want to be the person who's sort of, showing off in the office. You want to really make sure that you're professional and showing off work. So how do you sort of balance being humble and also getting recognition for the things that you do?
Well, I always say confidence is the expectation of a positive outcome. And that's not cocky. It's just expecting that you're going to show up and you're going to perform and you're going to get a positive outcome from that. And if you understand what the expectations are, that's going to make it a lot easier to show up and do what's expected. And I think a lot of times people either are not asking the right questions, or they're like looking at things. I don't really talk about this in my book, but when I'm talking with clients, a lot of times I'll talk about The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, where there was like sort of the surface of things going on and everybody thinks they know what's going on, but underneath of that there's like a whole nother universe. And that's basically what's going on in the workplace. And, people are like, well, hey, I showed up on time. I, did what was asked of me, and I left, on time, and I kept my nose clean. Like, why am I not getting promoted? Well, because maybe the stuff that you're doing is not that impactful. The company needs it, but it's not that impactful. If you understand like overall what's expected, not only in your department, but like what's the company's purpose, and that you really start thinking about how you connect to that, then you start focusing on the right things. You become confident because you're kind of, well, I understand what we're trying to do as a company. So if I have an idea, I'm going to feel more confident about stepping up and being like, hey, I've got an idea, instead of being like, okay, well, I'm just going to like sit here in the corner and be quiet and just do my spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that totally answered your question, but
no, it definitely did. Right?
It's not easy. It's not easy. And I think that you have to build those muscles up a little bit, because it's very different than school, where they're like, okay, we know exactly, like when your teacher is grading your test or your paper, they're looking for very specific things, right? And they're going to like check those off, and they're going to give you a grade based on their kind of grading key, right? In the workplace, it matters, that you're there and you've brought your ideas there. The people that get paid the most are the ones that are like thinking outside the box and
Yeah.
are recognizing that they've got a talent that the company needs and they're coming and performing.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. It's within a school system. I'm actually reading this book right now. It's by Kirk Westwood, actually. It's called The Very Best Bad
Yeah,
Idea.
yeah. Kirk and I went through the same book writing program. I know him. He's a
Oh,
great,
really?
great
Yeah,
guy. Yeah,
no, great guy. So yeah, I mean, even when I was talking to him, one of the main points that he says, and that's exactly what you're saying, it's the same thing. It's like in school, you guys are, or all of us are really taught we're given a problem and we have to find the solution. And that's really what a company is like. They give you a problem, you have to find the solution. But really, what you have to do, and this is what you're saying, is that you need to start looking at the problems and start trying to figure out what the problems are within the companies and try to see, okay, how can I contribute more value? How can I,
mm-hmm.
what are the problems that are going on in this organization and how can I find the problems and then also solve
Yeah,
them instead of just being given information and given tasks from your manager and just trying to solve them. I think
yeah.
one of the big,
That's pretty. Excuse me. That's pretty low level performance.
yeah, exactly, right? Like when you're only doing something
Yeah,
that the person wants you to do, it's like then you're going to be a great employee, right? But if you want to move up and move up towards the bigger, the bigger parts of the organization, those are the people who are finding the problems and solving them. So you really need to
yeah.
focus on gaining that skill.
Yeah. And I want to be sensitive to the fact that probably a lot of your listeners are, maybe in school or even beginning their careers. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying like when you're 22 years old, or your first internship that you should go in and be like, okay, I'm going to revolutionize the way that you guys do things here. You really are going to need to take guidance from the people above you, but think outside the box, even in that situation. Don't be afraid to ask questions and say, is there a reason why we do it this way? Because it seems like it would be easier if we did it this way. Like sometimes like the intern can come in and
Yeah.
make people above them realize like, oh, there's a better way of doing this. So I guess when you were asking about the difference between like being humble and cocky and confident, it's really like, how do you approach that? Do you come in and say, if you come in and you're like, this is stupid, that's not smart, right? That's kind of that
That's
can be kind of
cocky.
offensive, right? That's
Yeah.
cocky. But if you come in and you're like, hey, I'm just wondering, I've been working on this and it seems like that if we did it this way, it would be more efficient. Maybe there's something that you're not seeing, but maybe there's something that, your boss isn't seeing. So
Yeah.
you can ask the question and maybe you're going to revolutionize the way they do things.
Yeah, exactly. But if you come off as knowing all the answers, then they're
Right.
gonna look at you. They're gonna be like, "This young guy or this young girl just doesn't really know what's
Yeah.
going on." They have to sort of understand the industry first. I think,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about, just sort of like switching the topic, if we're talking about, people who are younger, right? I think the biggest problem that they're sort of experiencing, and I think, talking to a coach is something awesome, right, to be able to listen to. And it's like they're trying to figure out how could they do something that they really enjoy doing, but then at the same time that they could also keep, progressing, living a good life, having a good salary, and
Mhm.
doing the things that they actually want to do. So what do you find is the best way to sort of tiptoe the line of striving for success but also striving for individuality and doing the things that you want to do?
Well, there's a lot of there are a lot of tools and assessments that you can take that help you to understand what your sort of natural motivators are. And I think it's important, or your values. And I think it's important to understand these things about yourself. Just for example, with myself, it's funny, when I first got out of college, my boyfriend's mom at the time gave me this book called What Color is Your Parachute, which is like a perennial classic in career development. And it helps to, there's a lot of exercises in it that help people understand more about themselves so that they know what direction to go with their career. And I'm very thankful that she actually was sort of insistent that I do all of the exercises in the book before I started looking for a job. And I'm very thankful that she did, because I would have been one of those people that's like, I just need a job. You know, I'm not going to take a few days and do these exercises. I just need a job.
Yeah.
But because she encouraged me to do that, when I started looking for a job, I knew the direction I wanted to go in. And it was like publishing, advertising, or nonprofits. And I ended up getting a job with a publishing company. And because I'd gone through the exercises, I think that it helped me also to explain why I was the best candidate for the job, because I had thought about it, and I could go back into my experience in my life and talk about being on the yearbook committee in high school, and, you know, doing different things that aligned with this job. It wasn't just me saying the right things. I had a passion for this because it was just who I was.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, now I'm also not going to say that there are always trade-offs in your career, right? I mean, there are always things that you have to put up with. But it's just a matter of like that balance, right? Like, are you getting more satisfaction out of your career than the stress that it goes to manage your career, right?
Yeah.
And
One question that I had that was super interesting is that you say when you actually meet clients and you actually talk to them, you ask them, they tell you, they say, okay, I don't know what I want to do with my career, or I don't know, or I'm not happy where I am now. And then you ask them, what do you want? And then the first thing that they say is, I don't know what I want. I have no clue.
right,
So
yeah.
what do you find is the way to help people sort of like orient themselves, be like, okay, this is what I want. This is how I can
Yeah.
sort of figure it out.
Well, I guess it starts with my belief that people actually do know what they want deep down inside. They've just blocked off that kind of channel between their sort of inner wisdom and where the things that they love reside, and what they believe they need to do to be quote unquote successful in the external world.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, basically what I'm saying is that there's an ability to have overlap between what it takes to be successful and what you love to do. You know, that like place in the Venn diagram where those two circles
Yeah.
intersect, that's your zone of genius. And you know, if you can find, actually, I guess it's like three circles, because it's like, okay, what do you like to do? What are you good at? And what does the marketplace value? Where you find that like little triangular space, that's the best place to operate. But a lot of times people just say, oh, what can I do? And what does the marketplace value? They don't bring their selves into it,
And I
which
think
yeah, go ahead.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with the introspection, right? With looking into yourself, actually just taking a second to think about what does, you know, what do I really want? What am I working for? And to sort of uncover that, I think I
Yeah.
completely do agree. I was
It
actually,
matters. It matters what you
yeah,
want. You know, way too many people. One of the things that I tell people too, and I've seen it so often, is that people start to edit themselves before they let that start flowing. You know, they'll start to say like, oh, well, I always liked art. Oh, but I'm not good enough. Or
yeah,
you can't make money doing that. Or, you know, I'm too far along in my career. I can't do that. If you like saying what you want and figuring out how to get a career doing that are two completely different things. And you've got to allow the first one to happen before you ever have a chance of finding a path that's going to be satisfying.
yeah. And I also think that if you pursue something that you're passionate about, let's say you really like art, if you pursue
Mhm.
something that you're passionate about, you're going to have a lot more energy, a lot more motivation to do that.
Totally.
And you're going to
Totally.
actually, like, your potential is going to be so much higher because you're going to be pursuing something that you actually enjoy. If you do pursue something that you
Yeah.
don't like, then you're going to have that sort of, the only motivation that you're going to have is going to be that salary, the promotion, but it's
Sure.
not going to be the thing that really drives you from within.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There, yeah, there
Um,
was one thing that you brought up that I thought was so interesting. You said that people, and you actually started to study with this, that people actually become addicted to success.
mhm.
And when they become addicted to success, the promotions, the money, everything that really comes with it, then they forget, it's great that they become more successful, but they forget what
Yeah.
they want in the inside.
Well, they're looking for those external validators, right? They're like, oh, I got promoted to VP by the time I was 30, and everybody I went to school with is still back, at the manager level. They get addicted to those external things instead of, who cares what my title is if I love what I do?
Yeah, I think I think it's a really tough sell. It's a tough sell because for two reasons. One, first of all, there's the money aspect of it. And I think people
Yeah.
really, of course they want to have a stable job and, as much money as they possibly can get. And there are a lot of people who are just going to be sitting there and they're going to be like, you know what, I'm really, I'd rather go in something that's stable and something that makes a lot of money. And I don't really care about doing something that I like. So what would you really tell someone who's sort of in
Well, I
between on that?
mean, there are a lot of people like that. There are a lot of people whose passion and it gets fulfilled through something that is not work related, and all they want is just a job that makes money, which is fine. But most of the people that I work with are people that care a lot about what they do, and they want to be very successful. They're well educated. They didn't, bust their butt through, high school and college and maybe graduate school to just go get a job, just like kind of a job just that pays the bills. You
Yeah.
just don't do that if you just want a job that pays the bills. But there are people that are out there that do that, but they're clear on it, and when I go back to that, that question that I was asking earlier about, what do you want? What do you want out of life? Well, somebody might say, well, my religion is really important to me, and
Yeah.
I think volunteering is really important. Or, I like to do art on my own time, or I renovate houses on my own time. And I don't really care what I do from 9 to 5. That's just to pay the mortgage. And then I do this other stuff because this is where my passion lies. And that's great. But those people know, and they understand very clearly what the trade-offs are. But I'd say that I know for myself and for most of the people that I work with, they care a lot about their careers and they want to get fulfillment out of their careers.
When you say when they say that they care a lot about their careers, is it that like their main source of like energy, focus, and all that goes into their careers, or do you mean more of just like they wish that their careers are going to be, the thing that gives them the most fulfillment?
Well, I mean, I guess I would, I'm married and I have 3 kids. And so, when I first got out of business school, I wasn't married. Well, I got married right after business school, but, we didn't have any kids. And so my main thing that I was, besides my marriage, I was focusing a lot of energy on my career.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get a lot of fulfillment about like getting a new great job and, being moved and, getting all of the perks that went with the great new job and moving up within the company and getting a lot of new challenges and being able to travel and all the things that went along with that. That was like thrilling for me. It was fun. It was fun to work with senior level executives. And I just really liked that. I liked being able to create, and I knew I was having an impact in the organization. But as time went on, when I had kids, and I needed to, pay for daycare and save for college and all of that kind of stuff, it became more balanced. Of course, I cared about my career, but it did become more of a vehicle to fund my lifestyle at that point. But I still wanted to be happy because I needed the energy to put into my personal life. If I
Yeah.
was at a job that I was just like grinding it out and I was making a ton of money, but I came home like completely exhausted, that really wouldn't have served me well.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree. I think what I've noticed over the years when I speak to like, parents, because obviously I'm not in that position, right, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm, above
Yeah.
like, with whether I have kids, right? But for the people who do have kids, like I noticed that, right after work they come home and they're just like exhausted, right? And if the real purpose of your life, from what I've noticed is that the purpose of the life of the people's parents are their kids, right? And if the
Yeah.
purpose of your life is your kids and you're still being able to pay the bills but you can't dedicate your time to your kids, then what's the value of it?
Yeah. I've seen investment bankers, which, that those are probably the top
Yeah.
earning people at the bank that I worked at were the investment bankers, which, many of them were, well above seven figures. But they were traveling all the time, like they're basically road warriors. And I know at least a couple of the guys that I worked with left those jobs because their kids got to be teenagers and, were having, trouble in school, or, they just needed to be around more with their families. And even though they were making a ton of money and maybe their income, was reduced by 2/3, they obviously made that calculation, like, okay, why am I working? Right? Like,
Yeah.
if my kid's unhappy, and really needs me to be around, it doesn't make sense for me to grind it out and make tons of money but be absent from my family's life.
Yeah. So how do you find that someone could sort of make that transition, right? Like as a coach, how do you find that someone could go from, the high income earning job? How could they make that decision to quit and take a lower paying job even though they have kids?
Well, I mean, I think in those particular cases, these were people that were recognized as high achievers within the organization, and they were able to actually move from the investment bank into the commercial bank, which just provided a more stable lifestyle and,
Yeah.
work-life balance. But I think the most important thing is to be present with yourself throughout, right? To like really be looking and saying, like, okay, is my stress level so high that I'm coming home and screaming at my kids?
Yeah.
And to say, like, okay, what's causing this? What is the belief that I have that's not enabling me to be present and, show up the way that I want to show up in this situation? Because I think what can happen is that people don't allow that connection with their inner wisdom to remain open, right?
Yeah, no, I think it is true. There's actually a quote that you have in your book that I really, really liked. It says, "What I've found is that deep down they know exactly who they are," right? Talking to the people who are not happy, right? They know exactly who they are and what will make them happy. But for some reason, they're afraid to give in to their desires. My goal is to help them peel back the layers and uncover and reframe the fears so that they don't seem so insurmountable. And it's really true, right? That it's
Yeah,
sort of a fearful task,
yeah,
sort of making any sort of change in your life. And it's like, no, the goal
sure,
is to really make it, you know, sort of piece it up, sort of try to figure out, okay,
yeah,
this isn't that bad. It's not that much of a change. And
right,
this will actually be better for me. This will really help me out.
sure. And you don't have to, I mean, I also talk about this in terms of, people tell themselves a lot of things that keep them from taking action towards their goals. And a lot of it is our expectation that we've got to take some giant leap of faith. And really, we don't. We just have to take, very small steps, just making a decision or picking up the phone and calling somebody or Googling something can be the first teeny step towards the thing that is, the new chapter in your life.
What do you
Doesn't have
find?
to, yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So what do you find is really the way to sort of, really make that decision, right? Like what does it take for somebody to sort of come into you as a coach and be like, you know what? I've realized I need to make this change, right? Like I can't keep going on like this any longer.
Well, that's the first step, right? I mean, they always say, like, the first step to solving any problem is admitting that you have a problem.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I find is that people feel maybe like a sense of guilt or shame around having these feelings because they have a misperception that they're the only one that feels that way. Like, because they'll look around and they'll see other people being, what they think is being successful, and like they'll think nobody else has these problems. I can tell you from, being privileged enough to have people trusting me and coming and being transparent about what they're feeling or what they're experiencing, is that it's very, very common for people to feel inadequate and to feel like they don't have it all together. Even people that look like they do, a lot of times have insecurities. And, it's absolutely okay to, now, I don't know, sometimes I guess at work, you have to, like, they say fake it till you make it. I don't really advise that, but we don't have to get into that right now. But,
Yeah.
people feel the pressure to show up a certain way. But I think that's the beauty of having a coach, is that it gives people a safe place to come and what I call unpack what's going on in their lives. Because like, you know, if you unpack your backpack that you're carrying, your baggage, you unpack it and you start looking at it, you can make sense of it and decide like what's serving me well here and what's not. What are the beliefs that are limiting me? You know, what do I need to, you know, where do I need to replace a belief with something that's more productive or positive?
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't know. We're just like walking around with like a really, you know, irritated feeling, but we don't know where it's coming from.
Do you find that people just generally, because I've noticed this in my own life, that people generally aren't as introspective as you'd like them to think, right? So they're not very, you know, they don't really look at themselves and be like, okay, this is why I'm happy. This is what makes me unhappy. And I should start
Mm-hmm.
doing the thing that makes me happy more. Like they don't really,
Yeah.
you know, dig deep into figuring that out.
Sure, that's true. I say this all the time that you know, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. You know, we're like just walking around like this is me. You know, this is how I interact in life. And a lot of times we don't recognize that if we acted differently, we'd get different outcomes. Because
Yeah.
people will say like, oh, this always happens to me. I always have the worst luck. I always end up with terrible bosses. And I want to say like, well, you chose those jobs, you know, and it might be on a subconscious level that they keep, you know, they feel comfortable in a certain situation and they keep allowing themselves to get pulled into that situation. And it's just when you step back and you say, okay, deep down, what is the belief that you have about maybe your level of worthiness, about the value you can provide, whether, you know, this person reminds you of your brother who beat you up when you were a kid, you know, you feel comfortable in the situation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good situation for you. And so, you know, we all have ways of coping that we've learned as we've grown up. And our coping mechanisms have served us well in previous situations. But the problem is when we go into new situations and we bring those old coping mechanisms in, and we don't recognize that there's actually a different, more productive way to
Yeah.
cope with that situation. You know, but a lot of times that means that like, oh, you're going to have to show up differently, or you're going to have to speak up for yourself, or you're going to have to stop saying yes to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody is mean to you, you're going to have to say like, I'm not going to stand for that.
And I think that's the
That
best part
feels
about
weird.
having a coach, right? The best part about having
Yeah.
a coach is because we don't usually realize what we're doing wrong until
Yeah.
someone
We
tells us
don't.
that we're doing wrong. Exactly.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
honestly, I
And
think
there's
that
no
was,
shame in that. I have to say, there's no shame in that. You know,
yeah.
everybody does it. Coaches do it. I do it. You know, I work with coaches because I know I have blind spots and I want to get better. And it's really hard to do it on your own.
No, it's true. I think this book really did a good job of helping me find my blind spots. What it really did, and I think a big part of it is like you look at part of the at the end of each chapter, you have a little writing section. You know, here are some questions for you to get started, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, these are just introspective questions for people to ask each other, and that's essentially what a coach does, right? A
Mm-hmm.
coach is really
Yeah.
trying to help people, trying to understand themselves, and ask them these like essential questions.
Yeah.
So I did want to give you an opportunity. Why should people buy the Winning the Game of Work by Terry McDougall?
Well, if you are working hard and you're not getting the success that you would like to get at work, and then this book is a great guidebook to help you understand what you need to do to maximize not only your success, but your happiness at work. And as I've said a few times today, like it matters if you're happy.
Yeah,
And sometimes people will tell themselves that, like, oh, work is work. You can't be happy at work. You absolutely can. And I will tell you, as a hiring manager, that I more than once decided to interview a candidate who actually had less experience but more positive energy than another candidate that looked better on paper but was, you know, kind of a stick in the mud. So like the energy and the positivity and the productivity that you bring to the workplace matters.
yeah,
It really does.
and this book really did. It really does help you sort of introspect and be like, all right, you know what? Here are my weak spots. Here are the points where I could really bring some more energy. So I really did appreciate it. So, Tyree McDougall, thank you so much.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
All right. Take care.
Nick, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks.